Penny Black and Jill Foster here with your next PB&J card class. Today I'll be combining our new Pocket Treasures creative dies. This one is shades, and then I'll also be using that circular element from tabs and toggles with a classic Christmas image, Warm Wishes, to do some watercoloring. So here's a look at that card. And this technique will be great with a lot of our new Christmas stamps that you'll be getting sneak peeks of this week, and also the full reveal will be next week. But today I'm using this Warm Wishes stamp, and I'm stamping this with archival jet black ink. And I'm stamping this onto watercolor paper. This is Canson 140-pound watercolor paper. And then I am going to just heat this with the heat gun just to be totally sure that that ink is dry. Once it's dry, it's permanent, so I can add water and it won't smear or blend at all. But I just want to be sure it's totally dry on that paper. And then I'm going to be using 2 sizes of watercolor brushes. And then this is just my acrylic block, and I put a piece of white paper underneath so you could see the colors when I put them on. And I'm using Dr. P.H. Martin's Hydrus watercolors. All of these colors are from set 1, so you can buy them as a set. And I'm just putting them onto my acrylic block. This is essentially going to be my palette. You hardly need any. I always end up putting more than I need, but there's plenty of ink there. And I'm just putting some basic colors. So I have a rose red, a magenta, yellow, green, a little blue. Later I'll be adding some orange here, and I'll also add later some brown and some white. And I'm going to use, this is just clean water. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to work one petal at a time, and I'm going to first put down just a layer of clean water. This is going to help the watercolors blend when I add the actual pigment. Now I'm just picking up a little bit of that rose red, and I'm adding that to the petal that's already wet. And the more water you have on your paper, sort of the less control that you have over the blending, but it's just a totally different look. So here to blend that out, I just grab water and mix it in with the paint that's on the petal. I'm also going to add a touch of this orange. This is going to give it more of a true red, and add more of the rose red color back in. And I just keep going back and forth till I'm happy with the look. Also adding water. If you get any edges that you want to smooth out, you can add water and it'll sort of wick away that paint and let it blend. Now I'm going to zoom in here so you can get a little bit closer look. As I paint this, I am working on petals that are not touching. So you'll see I've jumped a couple and moved over to this one. That way it can dry completely and you don't have any of the paint start wicking away into another petal that you weren't painting. So just moving around and working on petals that don't touch while the other ones dry makes it a little bit easier to control. So you can see I painted it with clean water, added some pigment, and then I'm going back with water to blend it. Often I'll even just sort of pat the pigment and the water onto the image and let the water do the blending. And I like that that gives it that nice artsy watercolor look. So you can see they're just patting that on and letting the water blend it out. So you can see I continue to do that for all of the petals. Now I'm taking some brown, and I just wanted a darker shade of that rose red. So I'm mixing it in with that rose red until I'm happy with it. And you can't quite see, there you go. I'm just trying out to see what it looks like on that white paper that was beneath. Now I'm going to add this color anywhere that the petals are sitting underneath another petal. So I added a little bit of water, and then I'm just dropping in that brownish red color to add that shading. So I'm just continuing to look where there's a petal that is underneath another petal. So I'll add water there, and then I'll drop in the brown, let the water blend it, and then just go back with a little bit more water to blend those edges. Here I'm using a larger brush because I wanted to be able to put more water down onto the petal. I'm turning my image as I work just so that I don't set my hand into a place that's wet. And then you can just see I keep turning and adding that water, picking up the pigment, dropping it in. You can add more if you want it to be darker. And I'll continue to do that all the way around the poinsettia. Now you could stop there and just have your a nice reddish pink poinsettia. I decided to go back in and add some more color. So here I'm just putting some water down onto that petal and then picking up that beautiful golden yellow color and dropping that in towards the tips of the petals. And then I just use water to blend that as it starts to get closer to the red. So there, putting down the water, kind of patting and dropping in that pigment and then blending it out with the water. And I am drying this between each step. So after I added all that darker shading on the petals, then I dried it with my heat gun, or you could just wait to let it dry, and then I'll go back in with the other colors. Here I'm adding just a little bit more of that red to darken it up. And at this point, it's just a matter for me of just playing with until I'm happy with the colors. So there, after I added that red, I felt like I wanted a little bit more of that darker shadow on the petals that were underneath. And it's just going back and forth with the colors until you're happy, kind of working around so that wherever you're adding the paint and you're adding the water, that it's going to a next to a dry petal so you don't blend over into another petal. I'm really excited for our new Christmas release because there's a lot of really great images that are so fun to watercolor. And this technique would really work great with those as it does with this poinsettia image. All right, I'm going to dry that, and now is my favorite part, is doing the background. So I've mixed together some green and blue to make a turquoise. I'm using my larger brush, and I'm putting down some clean water. It's a little bit of blue tint to it, but that's fine. Around the edge of the poinsettia. So the poinsettia is dry. I put the water down, and I'm just dropping that pigment into that area. You can see it's pretty wet because you get that wonderful feathering and bleeding out of that ink, but it's only going to bleed where the paper is wet. So you've got some control so that it doesn't go into your poinsettia. So again here, just adding the water to the background and dropping in that pigment and just letting it move and blend on its own. I'm just continuing to do that all the way around the edge. You can always go back with more water if you want to blend it out a little bit more. But I really like the natural look where you just kind of let it move where it wants to on its own. And I'm starting here just by working around the outer part of the poinsettia, and later I'll go in and get that inner part using a smaller brush so that it's a little bit easier to apply that. And then this again is more of like here I'm swiping on the paint with the sweeping motion with the brush, but when I add the pigment, it's more of just tapping it and letting it pool and move around on its own. So just tapping that brush to the wet areas and letting the ink move around. So I went ahead and dried that, and now, sorry for my head there, I'm just using a smaller brush to go in and get into there. You can see when I move my head into those smaller sections that are on the inside. There you can see it a little bit better. And for these small areas, I'm doing more of just painting it in and less of just putting the water down and dropping the color in because it's such a small area, it just really, you wouldn't see much of that effect anyways, and this just gives me a little bit more control. Once that was finished, I painted just a little bit of yellow onto the center of the poinsettia, and here I'm just adding a little bit of yellow mixed with brown just to tone that down a little bit, give it more of a natural golden look. And I'm just adding water till it blends the way that I'd like it to. And then you can see here on my palette, I'm just mixing some of that brown In with the blue, I added a little bit more brown there. And I wanted to darken up some areas around the poinsettia. So that's why I added that brown to the blue, and then I'm going to paint that on. You can see there I'm adding the paint and then adding water to blend the edges and smooth that edge out. And I really am happy with the way that just that little bit darker color around the edges give that poinsettia some more dimension. So even though this is one layer, it doesn't look completely flat. I'm just kind of tapping that and letting it run. And then I'll continue to do that around the entire poinsettia. Next, I decided I wanted to add a few splatters to the background. So I'm just picking up some of that brown ink with water and just flicking my paintbrush onto the piece. I'm aiming for more of the background than on the poinsettia, but it's, if a few get on the poinsettia, that's nice too. And then here I'm using the white, and this is actually, it's titanium white. It comes with this set of watercolors, but it is opaque, somewhat opaque depending on how much water you add to it. And I like adding this on these winter images because it gives it kind of a frosty, snowy feel. So I just looked for the parts of the petals that were the lightest and added a little bit, and I'm even kind of pouncing it with my finger to blend it in. And you can really decide how detailed you want to get with these images. I mean, this looked pretty when it was just painted with that rose red before I even added the yellow in the background. But if you wanted to do a little bit more painting, then you can keep adding more and more layers. Like here, like I'm doing with the white. I am using some water to blend that out so it's not quite as opaque and you still get some of the other color behind. And here I decided to keep going. I added water directly to that paint on the palette. So it was a little bit more watered down when I added it to my image. There I'm just using a baby wipe to sort of blend it as it moves into the other color. Just give it a softer look. And I'm not putting this on every petal, just here and there. And then I decided why not get messy and add some more splatters, so I'm just adding water and flicking that onto the image as well. So here's a look at that finished watercolor piece on the card. I actually created the background with the watercolors as well. I just put some brown and yellow and white on my acrylic block and smushed my watercolor paper into it, and it's really that simple. And added all those layers together with some twine and a sentiment. Here's a list of supplies, and thanks so much for watching.